Hi, everybody, and welcome to this evening's episode of The Rope of Hope. Tonight, I am being joined by Kara Fernstrom. Kara, thank you so much for being here.
How are you today?
I am good. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Really happy to be here.
Good. Well, before we get started, you guys, I would love if you would want to support this podcast. I have put so much love and effort into this, and it really is like having another child. These podcasts are my babies. But to keep them going, I need your support. So if you go to buymeacoffee.com/, this fat girl life, that is where you're going to find out all things that are coming up. And y'all, there is some tea coming. Huge. And that is where you find it first. So even if you're not a financial supporter, you could be a follower and still get that tea. Go to buymeacoffee.com/, this fat girl life. So before we really kind of go into the message of this episode, why don't you tell everybody just a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so as you said, my name is Kara. I am a Canadian podcaster living near Vancouver, sort of. I mean, it's a big world, so I don't want to be too specific because then people get confused. But it's close to Vancouver. And yeah, I podcast about happiness and well-being and have a wealth of opportunities in spite of being disabled, which is, I think, what we are talking about a little bit today.
Yes, it definitely is. So we are going to go into your disability. I'm going to let you explain that to everybody. But we're also going to talk about the podcast and what it means to you and why you got started on it. So at this point, I'm going to kind of let you take the reins, and I will ask questions as we go.
All right. So do you want me to start talking about sort of my illness in the background
Yes,
before all this happened?
perfect.
Okay. So I had some addiction issues when I was a kid and everything, and then things started to get okay for a little while. And then after like 3 or 4 years of being clean, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is not what I have. It was a misdiagnosis, which was later corrected to fibromyalgia. And later they discovered I also have sarcoidosis. So sarcoidosis is a chronic inflammatory, it's very hard to explain, but it's granulomas, which is actually a natural part of the body, but they stick around instead of leaving. And so that ends up doing things like causing lesions on your organs. I have some scarring on my lungs from it, and chronic pain and fatigue and brain fog and stuff like that. And so I was diagnosed, and basically I had to leave the workforce. I was just not able to be as reliable as I wanted to be. And emotionally, I struggled with that just like a lot. And in time, I would try different things, try to, work. I remember I would specifically try to work jobs where I knew I was extremely replaceable, which was not very great for my self-esteem, but I knew that I would eventually end up having to leave because of my health. And I just felt so guilty when people relied on me. So I ended up working, at the dollar store and a few different retail things. And it's not that there's anything wrong with those jobs. In fact, I really, really admire people who are strong enough to do those jobs. But I was not well suited to it. And even if I had been well suited to it, I was forced out of those jobs as well because of my health. Just in the sense that I just couldn't be reliable. I had doctor's appointments and I had to, ended up having to go to the hospital and get all this different testing done and all of this different stuff. So I was basically just pushed right out of the workforce despite my trying not to be. And then sometime later, I started my Artstrom, which is the design business that I do as well, which that sort of built into the confidence that I needed, where I realized that you can sort of just take life by the horns and make a position for yourself, make something, a life that works for yourself. Because I was like, okay, like everybody already knew I was an artist, but I was like, okay, I'm a professional artist. And people were like, all right, and started sending people to me. And I was like, oh, it's really, it not always, but it really can be that straightforward. And so when the podcasting sort of started, a lot was happening in my life. I was doing a lot of research around well-being and trying to figure out, I remember thinking like I can be sick and sad, or I can be sick and happy. And of those two, I would much rather be sick and happy. I mean, I might not be able to change the sick, but I can change, sometimes I can change the mindset. So what was interesting is as I did more and more research and reading scholarly articles, which is something that I've always been really good at for some reason, reading these different articles and all of this stuff, more and more people would come to me for advice and ask my opinion on, like, I was chronically single and people were asking me relationship advice and all sorts of stuff like that. And so I tried to write a book, and I wrote the book. Book never made it to market. And part of the reason for that was because it wasn't dynamic. I knew that I was constantly learning and changing, and I didn't want something that was written in stone, quote unquote, to represent myself. I also knew that I needed other people to participate in the conversation, which led to the show. Do you have any questions so far? I feel like I'm just gonna.
I do, actually. Now, you mentioned you were an addict previously.
Yes.
Can I ask?
Crack and cocaine.
Okay, so being a former addict myself, I know with that combination, it's very numbing and very altering.
Mm-hmm.
So, how difficult has it been having not only sarcoidosis, which causes pain, but then you've got fibromyalgia, which causes even more pain?
Yeah.
So, you've got potentially addictive treatments.
So,
how difficult is that?
That's a really interesting question, and I probably have a bit of a weird answer. And that is that in the research that I've done, the exploration that I've done, I've come to understand that there is a distinct difference between substance use and substance abuse. And so a lot of these substances that are extremely addictive have functions that, like actual medicinal functions. And so, like you're referring to, I am prescribed opiates. I do not take them every day. I actually don't find it challenging at all because I know what falling into addictive behavior did to me so long ago that, like, see, I'm the worst person to talk to about addiction, because for me, once it was over, I was kind of okay. I kind of come to a place where it's like, I'm not really for it, and it's actually to the point where I don't like medicating for my pain. And that causes, if anything, it causes problems in that way where I don't medicate as much as I should because I don't like feeling like I'm altered.
That's actually very common with addiction. I personally deal with the same thing.
Interesting.
I am on medication for nerve damage.
Oh, okay.
And one of those is a pain medication. And I will do everything I can to avoid taking that because I know what that rabbit hole looks like.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually it's a very common response among former addicts.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting too because it's only with the addictive substances that I really interact with it that way. With things that aren't addictive, like there's medicinal uses for all sorts of substances, both approved and not approved, however you want to say it. And if it's a substance that falls into a category of useful but not addictive, I don't have that same reaction where I'm viscerally opposed to it. Like there's certain psychedelics and stuff that can help with trauma and stuff like that. So I've explored that. And it's not nearly as scary as, oh, I'm in a lot of pain. Should I take my opiates?
Yeah, 100% understand. I do the same thing. I take hemp gummies that are not addictive, non-THC, but it has the properties to help with the pain. I do it, I 100% know what you are saying and can relate to what you are saying.
Yeah, it's cool to hear that, because I always feel like a weirdo when it comes to my relationship to substances. Like I do medicinally use cannabis, but as you said, I mean, is it addictive? It's addictive in the same way that video games are. Like you can get addicted to anything, but it's not an addictive substance in and of itself. So, and like it's a weird lane to go down because people are like, oh, you've been clean from crack for 13 years. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, so you must hate drugs. And I'm like, well, not really as a use, if for their functions, they're fine. I just don't like addiction.
The abuse.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I totally, yeah. Right there. And it's weird because I have talked to other former addicts. And they deal with the exact same thing. and
That's
go through the exact same thing.
that's so interesting because I've had a lot of people tell me, a lot of people tell me that once an addict, you're always an addict and you can't get out of it. And then also things around the idea that, if I've, used cannabis, that that's the same as not being clean. And I'm like, well, if you saw my life, like when I was using cannabis versus when I was using crack, you would probably not take that stance. Um, so it's really cool and refreshing to hear that there are people who have a more similar understanding of it to me.
Oh yeah, and the same thing could be said about me having a glass of wine.
Yeah,
I was an
exactly.
addict for 8 years. I could drink a glass of wine now and I'm fine. One glass will feel it,
Yeah.
but it's like it's not an addictive thing for me.
Hmm.
I go 5 months between glasses of wine.
Exactly.
However, Dilaudid, I can't mess with
Yeah.
because that was my go-to. So I know I totally understand that, and that's why you brought that up. Of is that an issue?
Yeah. Yeah. And so, like I said, for me, I'm actually like pretty comfortable with my relationship to substances. I feel safe. I guess I'm also prescribed cyclobenzaprine, which is lorazepam. It's a, it's one of those benzodiazepines
Mm-hmm.
or something. They're addictive, is my point. They're said to be addictive, and the same idea, right? If I absolutely need it, I have it. My doctors make sure that I have it in case I need it, because of course anxiety can build and cause more problems with the physical health stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, let's just nip that in the bud. But same idea where it's like, I will avoid it when I can.
Totally get that, and that makes perfect sense. For somebody who has never dealt with it, it may not make sense.
Hmm.
But somebody who's been in that down that road, it makes perfect sense. I had another question, and now I can't remember it.
It's because I raced through my life story like I always
No,
do.
no. Um, so okay, so when you started, looking at these other, avenues that you could
Yeah.
take, I know you said that you were looking for a position where you could be replaceable,
Hmm.
but in that, were you also looking for something that was going to bring joy at the time, or were you just needing to fill the pocketbook?
Well, actually, so I am in BC and am incredibly frugal. So I'm on disability, and if you're incredibly frugal and lucky, can be enough to live on. So actually, money was not an issue. It was really just that if I'm being like really honest and I break it down, I struggle with, or less so now, thankfully, but especially at the time, struggled with my self-worth when it was not tied to productivity. Felt like if I wasn't working, then I was not of value. Now, my opinions on that and capitalism as a whole and all sorts of other things have shifted quite a bit, but that was something that I really struggled with, was feeling like I was useless. Like, what was the point of me if I wasn't working? And someone was just handing me a check all the time and stuff like that. And that's really where I was at for a long time. And of course, again, now I realize that our worth is inherent. And if, even economically, if I touch like emotionally change one person's life for the better and they're more productive, then I have contributed to
Mm-hmm.
the economy in a positive way. Not to mention spending and all that stuff. Like, I realized that pretty much no matter how you look at it, every human life has worth. But at the time, I didn't understand that, and so I was trying desperately to fill the gap in my time and heart with work.
So now I know with both the fibro and sarcoidosis,
Hmm.
you have moments, and times in your life where you have flare ups, so to speak, and it causes that brain fog that you touched on and issues like that. How do you now handle those when you're in that spot where you may not be able to be as productive as you were the day before?
Well, the number one thing that I recommend is the, like, the Self-compassion. I know that that's a bit of a buzzword lately and it gets thrown around a lot, but I think that that's for a reason. Loving myself sort of, or like what I was talking about before, regardless of that productivity, has gone a really long way in, interestingly enough, in allowing me to be more productive overall, because then I'm not stewing in how crappy I feel all the time. But what I tend to do is I think of two modes. I have survival mode, and then I have sort of thrive mode or whatever. And so when I have these flare ups, which I have been having recently, I go into what I call survival mode, which is the basic rules are survive, um, and do everything I can not to blow up what I've worked for when I'm not just surviving. So, when it comes to the podcast, I try to make sure that I have episodes pre-recorded. So, because I don't know when I'm going to get sick, right? So I have episodes pre-recorded and ready to go, so that if I'm sick, all I have to do is type in a description and press a few buttons and release it. Same thing with my relationships. One of the first things I do when I'm in pain is I let my inner circle, whatever you want to call it, know that, hey, right now is not really a time that I'm going to be able to be there for you all the time. Like, I might not be available and I might need help. And I go and I let my circle know that. And that's part of survival mode. But the biggest part of survival mode is, ironically, discipline, because I have those struggles with, it's not just self-worth. I really do enjoy doing things too, right? Boredom's an issue and stuff like that. So ironically, the discipline comes in when I have to force myself not to work, not when I I don't have to force myself to work. That doesn't really require any self-discipline. It's when I have to force myself to rest, because if I don't, I'm going to end up in the hospital or with much worse symptoms. And then all of that work that I've done gets blown up. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. So now you're in this position where you have this podcast. What inspired you to create the Conquest of Bliss?
That's a really good question. And like I said earlier a little bit, it kind of started as a book and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I mean, in simplest terms, it really started with a Facebook post where I said, should I do a podcast, a blog, or a vlog? And it was overwhelmingly podcast. But the reality of it, I think, is just that I knew it was time to just create something that helped people, because the biggest reason that I went in the direction that I did was, so the Conquest of Bliss is about happiness and well-being, is because through all of this work that I was doing, all of this digging, all of this trying to be okay in a terrible situation, I found that all the resources were really hard to find. Like I said earlier, I'm really good at reading scholarly articles, like medical journals and law stuff. And most people aren't. Most people can't sift through a medical journal to find the information that they're looking for. Most people, don't have hours and hours to spend on the internet curating hundreds of different ideas to try and figure out what works for them. Most people don't have the money to go to a therapist for a year at a time to get these tools firsthand. So I saw a really, really big hole in the market where there's lots of people talking about inspiration and hope and beautiful things that are also so important. But I didn't see that many people talking about the tangible tools for well-being that maybe will work for someone and not for another. Right. And so that's at the time in March 2020, right before the pandemic. I kid you not, 2 weeks before the pandemic was when I released my first episode. I was like, oh, but I didn't at the time see that. And we are seeing more crop up, which is very cool. But at the time I didn't see that. And I thought, this stuff should be way more accessible than the stuff that is accessible. Mm-hmm. You can spend hours of your day reading news that's just spoon fed to you about how terrible everything is. And it takes hours of your time to find one useful piece of information about, some people it's mindfulness, some people it's grounding exercises, some people meditation, and then other people it's acting, or writing a book, mm-hmm. or boxing. You never know. There's hundreds of thousands even of these tools. Sorry, I'm getting excited because it's something I'm very passionate about.
No, that's fine. I love that. And I love that you have really dedicated yourself to this. I kind of talked earlier about how these podcasts are my babies. This is your baby,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something you nurture and you care for just like you would a child. So I get it. I think that's something that in this arena, in this career choice, in this field, we understand each other there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, it's so inspiring, and I'm sure that doing the show that you do, you have similar experiences
Mm-hmm.
where I get reviews or comments or even just private messages from people saying like, hey, I listened to this show and I really needed to hear this. Or I have started taking the advice from this X expert or X layman from your show and it's been life changing. Or any of these things. And it's like it sounds silly because you'd think that this would be the goal from the beginning, but it really wasn't. It was like, holy crap, this is making a difference in the world. Like holy crap.
Yep. Yeah, I totally get it because when I first started this, podcast life, I joke, I didn't choose the podcast life chose me. It started with one, and I had that focus, and now I've got a fourth one in the works. So it's this ever growing thing, but it becomes a passion, and it's it becomes the job that you have that you never knew you were going to love. That's the only way I can describe it.
Well, and like, since we're kind of on the topic, how cool is it to get to talk to just some of the most incredible people? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's been like I want to say it's humbling, but it feels like the opposite. It feels like it's been anti-humbling, the number of people that are willing to talk to me, and I'm like why?
Yeah.
Every time someone
Oh,
says yes, I'm like, really?
yes. I totally, girl. Yes. I totally understand. I just reached out to somebody last week and I was like, there's no way this guy is coming on my show. This show has been in existence for 2 months. He ain't coming on this show. He's working out his schedule to come on my show.
Oh,
And
that's
I was like, oh
fantastic.
my God, I can't believe that I'm booking this person, and yeah, I get it. You go through that fangirl moment or whatever, and that's what I call it. I've had the guest that I ugly cried over, and I had that fangirl moment. And in that same respect, it's like, why are they coming on my show? I'm such a little fish in a very big pond.
Mhm.
So I get it.
Yeah, like it's like this. I feel like I'm constantly going back and forth between like arrogance and what's it called? Imposter syndrome. And I'm just like
Mm-hmm.
one or the
Mm-hmm. And imposter syndrome
other.
is a whole different topic for a whole nother show.
hmm
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, Kara, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of this resting phase that you need to be in right now to come on my show. I really am touched and humbled by it because you could have easily been like, you know what, I can't do this right now. And you're still here. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And I mean, you're not wrong. It's been a very challenging phase. I haven't been doing much. But you know what, Kimberly, I really, really enjoy your work. I think you're a fantastic person.
Oh,
And
thank
I was
you.
worried that if I didn't make the time now, that it would always get pushed back. And that's not how I want it to be. So I'm very, very happy to have made it.
Well, I do have one final question for you.
Ooh,
I ask this question of every guest that I have.
all right.
What is the most inspiring thing that has ever been said to you?
It's really simple, but probably just you are enough.
I love that. And it does. It's something that seems like it's so simple, yet for so many of us, it feels so impossible.
Yeah, it often doesn't feel true, but Again, I mean, I can't speak enough about inherent human value and how easily forgotten it is.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. You guys, that is it for this episode. But if you hang around for about 15 minutes, I have another episode happening in 15 minutes.
Fantastic.
So definitely hang around. Carol Lee Welder is going to be coming on, and we are going to have a great conversation there as well. Kara, thank you so much again. Go get some rest. I will talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you soon, Kimberly. Thank you so much.
Have a great night,
You too.
guys.
Oh.